Hello, everybody. I'm recording this video lecture from Tuesday's class. This is mostly for eighth period because we just didn't get a chance to get through this. But if you're in my second period class, if you missed or just want to go back and look at this, you're more than welcome to. Um, so this first slide is mostly just covering stuff from before we left for spring break. I know we did a Vietnam assignment, a history of Vietnam assignment that kind of showcased some of the key vocabulary and key concepts in terms of, how the Vietnam War got started and the history behind it. So kind of going through this really quick. Again, this is all review. We haven't done this for about a week and a half now, 2 weeks. So again, just reviewing. So Vietnam has a long history of being controlled by foreign powers. So we can think about that assignment that we did. China, Japan, France. So for hundreds of years, the Vietnamese were used to fighting these big powers coming into their country and taking them over. That's called imperialism. Remember that. So the Vietnamese have been fighting off these big groups, wanting their independence, wanting their freedom, and they have a history of fighting these big powers. So when America comes in, you have people that are already trained and are willing to fight to the last man and woman to get their independence. They're fighting over their homeland. So in terms of reasons why they're fighting and why they're so passionate about it, well, that's why they're protecting their home. They want freedom. The Orange area. This really, tells the tale of two halves here. During World War II, Vietnam was controlled by Japan. Japan was our enemy during World War II. So naturally, the United States begins helping out the Vietnamese, specifically a guy by the name of Ho Chi Minh. Now, Ho Chi Minh was a very passionate and strong communist with strong communist ties. You got to understand that during World War II, our policy wasn't necessarily containment yet. Japan was our enemy, so we were helping out anybody who was going against the Japanese. So during World War II, we're sending in troops and military personnel into Vietnam, and we're training Ho Chi Minh. We're training the Viet Minh people. We're giving them weapons. We're giving them supplies to fight off the Japanese. However, when World War II came to an end, that's when our containment policy came into play, and that's when we began to stop supporting Ho Chi Minh. So there was a war that broke out between the French and the Viet Minh, and the Viet Minh wanted our support. But because we were in that containment policy, we did not help out the Viet Minh. We did not help out Ho Chi Minh, although he was begging and pleading for our help. But we couldn't because of foreign policy, with containment policy. So the Green Area. Now, with that war that was fought between the French and the Viet Minh, it ended up with the Viet Minh winning at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. When that happened, there was this meeting called the Geneva Accords, where world leaders met and they agreed to take Vietnam and they split it north and south because, again, America did not want communism to spread. They did not want the entire Vietnam area to be controlled by purely communists. So therefore, we had to split. Very similar to Korea, exact same thing. So North Vietnam is controlled by Ho Chi Minh and the communists. South Vietnam will be U.S. controlled, and we'll place a guy by the name of Ngo Dinh Diem into power. Now, to make this clear, Diem was, how can I put this? He was the best of the worst options. He was kind of an unknown, but the reason why we backed him compared to other people was because Diem was really two things. He was a staunch Catholic, which is kind of what our country kind of based on, that Christianity type of mentality. And two was that he was a staunch anti-communist. He hated communism. So here's a problem. Over the years, Diem began to rule South Vietnam, and he became very unpopular. And he really became a problem for the United States because essentially what we were supporting a dictator, and that didn't really have the support of his people. He did not support the South Vietnamese very well because, again, he was a Catholic, and most Vietnamese were Buddhists. Diem was also, again, a Catholic. He was also rich, and he favored the rich. And a lot of the Vietnamese in South Vietnam were poor peasants. So the idea of promising, free elections and things of that nature did not happen under Diem. Again, we supported a dictator. So he rigged elections, and again, remember at the Geneva Accords, he promised a 1956 election. Well, it didn't happen because Diem pulled out because he knew he was going to lose to Ho Chi Minh. In the elections, when he was elected as government leader in South Vietnam, the election was rigged compared to his opponents. Remember back from when we did our Gilded Age unit and how Tweed and they rigged elections by padding the ballot box? That's what he did. There were thousands and thousands of thousands of more votes than were actually voters. And they found out that those elections were rigged. He instituted a draft. He forced citizens to leave their homes, and he forced them into camps that would be watched by military. He banned political parties. Think about what dictators do. They don't like opposition. And he was very violent towards Buddhists. There was a few cases where Buddhists were holding marches in protest of Diem, and Diem's brother they ordered their men to shoot upon the Buddhists, and some of them were killed. He arrested them, tortured. Again, Diem did not like opposition, just like what dictators do. So needless to say, Diem was not very popular. And the opposite of our goals ended up becoming true, that a lot of the South Vietnamese ended up joining the Viet Cong because of Diem. All right, so that's all review, things that we talked about before break. All right, so fast forward now 1963. So by 1963, again, this is all in your guys' guided notes, Diem has essentially lost control of South Vietnam. At this point, 9 years into rule, 9 years into power, South Vietnam was an absolute mess. It was definitely not a better place because of Diem. And America was kind of put in a really rough spot because we supported Diem. But by 1963, our support began to dwindle. We're trying to find a way out. How can we place somebody else in power? And we actually got word, and through our intelligence, that we knew that there were plots to kill Diem, and we did nothing to really stop it. So we knew he was a problem. Viet Cong presence in South Vietnam was increasing, so that was a big problem for us. JFK wanted Diem removed, and we know that because there were tapes and documents now that support that about how we knew Diem was going to be killed. And fast forward to 1963, Diem will be assassinated. And it's kind of ironic, 18 days after Diem's death, JFK will also be assassinated. So here's a picture. So when JFK is assassinated, we have a new president, which was vice president under JFK, is Lyndon B. Johnson. I call him LBJ for short. Now, this is very important for you to understand this. LBJ, President Johnson, is going to escalate the war. He's going to severely increase the war in Vietnam, as you'll see this in the next slide. And next two slides. So there was something called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. Now, the reason why Lyndon B. Johnson is going to escalate the war was because of this incident. And basically what the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution is, it was a document that basically where Congress is going to give the power to a president to have any and all powers to repel an invasion. So essentially what it does, it basically gives the president a huge amount of war powers. Put it in plain language, the president does not have to go to Congress for permission to launch an invasion. So that's something that is important. Again, think about, you're basically getting rid of a checks and balance. You're giving war powers to one person, which is very, very dangerous. And later, this will be repealed because of Vietnam and some of the disagreements behind it. But ultimately, this was the rule during Vietnam. This is why he was able to escalate it, because of this document. And what happened was there was a U.S. battleship called the USS Maddox that was stationed in the Gulf of Tonkin, which is just on the waters that border Vietnam. And this battleship essentially was there to spy on the North Vietnamese. And we claim that we were fired upon first and we retaliated. And you got to understand, the old method would be if Lyndon B. Johnson wanted to go and fight North Vietnam because of this first shot fired, he would need to go to Congress first. Well, LBJ is going to argue, well, I don't have time when we're being shot at to go to Congress and ask for permission. So this is why Congress will eventually grant Lyndon B. Johnson the ability to increase the war effort in Vietnam. So he will use this to convince Congress to escalate in 1964. So you guys see that by this graphic here. So you guys see here with 1960 to 1964, you see a very minimal amount of troops, very small amount. 20 to 25,000 U.S. troops are in Vietnam in those 3 years. Look what happens when LBJ takes power. Boom, over about 125,000. 1966, 310,000. 1967, 450,000. 1968, 525,000 troops. So again, these are all Lyndon B. Johnson years. He's going to escalate the war. And then obviously you see, once Lyndon B. Johnson, spoiler alert, he will lose the election in 1968, and you see it slowly start decreasing under Nixon. All right, so it's important for you to understand that. Johnson is going to escalate the war. All right, now going into war tactics. This will be kind of your assignment that you guys worked on Wednesday for the book assignment. Again, the Vietnamese knew they could not fight a conventional war against the United States. They couldn't just line up and fight us. Our military might, our technology was much more superior. So they use a technique called guerrilla warfare. Now you got to understand that Americans aren't really used to this style of war. This isn't World War I where you fight in trenches, and this isn't World War II where you fight in basically drawn out battlefields out in the forest or out in cities. You're fighting against people that are kind of blending in and out of civilian life, that they are not necessarily wearing military uniforms. You really can't tell who your enemy is. And the enemy, the Viet Cong and NVA, they're going to use the jungle as their advantage. They're going to build underground tunnels. They're going to build booby traps all over the jungle. Again, with guerrilla war, you don't want to fight the whole U.S. Army. You want to fight pockets of them. You choose when you fight and where you fight and when you fight. That is what guerrilla warfare is. You fight small pockets of American soldiers. You don't want to fight the whole thing. Guerrilla warfare, you want to avoid a big loss. Okay? So you dictate when you fight because you're hiding underground. You choose when you pop up. You choose when you attack. That's what guerrilla warfare is. So this is a very different war than what we're used to fighting, and a very difficult war to fight when you got people who are trained in this type of warfare. So this picture you guys see, how these networks, these tunnel networks are very intricate. You see, they have water lines down here so their soldiers can get water. You have places for them to sleep, play games. They can move from one place to the other. They got air shafts, different tunnels that connect different aspects from the jungle. Also, you see here, this is from somebody's, kind of showing you guys, like these little villages. Tunnels go from their hut all the way to the jungle. So you see how small these things are. So they're very difficult to find, guys, out in the middle of the jungle. These openings are not very big. So this is kind of what I'm talking about in terms of strategy for the Vietnamese, in terms of how it's going to be difficult for us to fight against this kind of war. And then, obviously, you see here, these tunnels leading out into the jungle. Look how small these things are. All right, so I posted yesterday in Google Classroom. I posted this video. It should have been posted. It's in Google Classroom. Let's see here where it's at. Vietnam War documentary. If you look down to Vietnam, you got to scroll down to Vietnam a little bit. It's Vietnam War documentary. I'm not going to do it on this. I would highly recommend watching it because you'll see a lot of the booby traps that the Vietnamese are going to set in the jungle. Unfortunately, we just don't have time to show it on this, but it's going to be kind of on you to watch it. Really, you don't need to watch the whole thing, but if you watch the first 7 to 8 minutes, 10 minutes of it, that should be more than sufficient. All right. So make sure you have this stuff copied in your guided notes. You are going to need this for your exit ticket on Friday. All right. Adios. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.